Bead Basics and thank you for watching this jewelry tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to create this statement necklace. All the materials can be found on our website www.beadsandbasics.com, and you can always choose to create this necklace in different sizes and different colors, such as this purple one. The necklace might look very impressive, but I promise you that the technique is fairly easy. It will just take some time because the necklace is very big. So let's not waste any more time and start with the tutorial. Here are the used materials. You'll need a bead mat, 4mm pearls, 6mm pearls, a short needle, Ceylon thread, facetted beads, and those are 3 by 2mm, gemstone beads, and those are 10mm, 3 different colors of the Miyuki seed beads, and those are 2mm, a pair of scissors, and jewelry glue. You will also need these flower beads, and lastly you will need this rose gold toggle clasp. So in this video I'm going to show you how to make this necklace, but to not make this video too long, I decided to only show you how to create this middle part. So let's get started. So for the necklace in this video we only need 3 gemstone beads. So we start by using the Miyuki seed beads, the Ceylon thread, and the short needle. So I start by cutting off about 1 meter of the Ceylon thread. And thread this through your needle. So then we're going to add 24 seed beads, and this is the amount you need for the 10mm gemstone bead. If you use bigger or smaller beads, you can adjust how many seed beads you use, but just make sure that it's an even number. When you're done adding the 24 seed beads, you can make a double knot in the Ceylon thread, and this will create a circle. And make sure you leave some Ceylon thread at the end, because we will need this to tie off our work at the end. So this will be where we later put our 10mm gemstone bead in. To start your second row, you add another Miyuki seed bead. So our starting point is where we finished our first row, so at the knot, you skip 1 bead and you go through the next one. Pull the Ceylon through, and then it will look something like this. And now we just repeat this for the rest of the row. So as you can see, this technique will be repeated throughout the necklace. So the technique is not so difficult, but it will just take a lot of time. As you can see, this is where the Ceylon comes out of. You skip this one and you go through the next bead. Thread the Ceylon through, and then it will look something like this. Now you can repeat this for your second row, and when you're back at the beginning, I'll show you how to finish this row. When you reach your last bead, it will look something like this. And as you can see, I can only add 1 more bead. So you skip 1 bead, you go through the next one, and you also go through your first bead of your second row. Push your needle through, and when you pull tight, your sun shape will be complete. To finish this row, we will fill in the spaces of the second row. So grab another Miyuki bead, and this time we're going to skip the beads from the first row. So we only go through the beads from the second row. You will notice that once you're halfway through and you pull tight on the Ceylon, that the sides are trying to stand up, and this is a good sign because it means that it's already forming some sort of a nest. and we're going to use this for our gemstone bead. Now you can finish this row as well until you're back at the beginning, and then I'll show you how we start our third row. As you can see, I'm at the point of adding my last seed bead, and you can see when I pull tight, the sides will stand up, so this is good. So I add another seed bead and I go through the two beads that are next to each other. Now pull tight so the sides will stand up a little bit. And then we can fit the gemstone bead to see if it's a good fit or if it's too big or too small. In my case, it's a perfect fit. So we can continue with the third row. For our third row, the technique will be the same. So we're going to add one more Miyuki bead. And as you can see, this is where we last came out of the bead. So we're going to skip one Miyuki bead and we go through the next one. Push your needle through and pull tight, and then it will look something like this. And this is your starting point for your third row. This is also something you're going to repeat for the rest of the row. So you start from your last bead, skip one bead and you go through the next one. Now you can continue this third row, and when you're back at the starting point, I'll show you how to finish your third row. So as you can see, I'm back at the starting point again. So we're gonna add one more Miyuki bead. We skip one bead and we go through the next one. And you're also gonna go through the first bead of your third row. Now when you pull tight, you will see that the nest is formed, and now it's time to add the gemstone bead. You can push it in the beads a little bit. So from now on you're going to hold the gemstone bead and finish the third row. You add one more Miyuki bead, and this time you're gonna skip all the beads from the second row. So we're only gonna go through the beads of the third row. So we're gonna fill in the gaps again. Now you can finish this third row as well, and then I'll show you how to start your fourth row, and this is also the last row. So I'm almost finished. I can only add one more bead. So I grab one more Miyuki bead. I go through the first bead of my third row and the one above it. And it's time for our fourth row, and this is also the last row. And for this row we will use the rose gold beads. So the technique is still the same, but this time we do it with rose gold. So here you can see the Ceylon thread. We're going to skip this bead and we go through the next one. Pull tight, and then it will look something like this. And this is also something we're going to repeat for the rest of the row. So we're going to add one more Miyuki bead. We're going to skip this one and we go through the next bead. So you can finish this row as well, and then I'll show you how to tie off this fourth row. As you can see, I can add only one more rose gold bead. So I'm going to skip this bead. I go through the last blue bead, and I also go through my first rose gold bead. So to finish off this row, the start is the same because we're going to fill in the gaps in between the rose gold beads, but only the end is different. So you're going to add one more milky bead, and we're going to skip all the blue beads and only go through the rose gold beads. This is also something you're going to repeat for the rest of the row, but at the end there is a little twist, so I'll show you how to do that. So as you can see, I'm at the end of this row. Normally we're going to add one more milky bead, but this time, to make sure that everything is more tight around the gemstone, we're going to skip this part. So we're not going to add a milky bead, but instead we go only with the needle and the sealant thread through those two rose gold beads. Pull tight, and then lastly we only go through the last row of our rose gold beads. And when you pull tight, you will notice that it's more secure around the gemstone now. And now it's time to finally make a knot and secure our work. As you can see, this is where we have our sealant thread, and we go through the two middle blue beads. Pull your needle through, and then we're going to look for a sealant bridge. That is a sealant thread that's in between two beads, and you go underneath this part of the sealant thread. Push your needle through, but leave a little bit of a loop so we can go back through the loop and make a knot. Repeat this one more time, so go underneath the sealant thread, leave a little loop, go back through the loop and create a knot. To make it extra secure, I'm going to use a little bit of glue. So we're going to add some glue on the knot, and it's okay if it's a bit too much, you can always wipe off any excess. And now, to hide our knot, you're going to push your needle through the next milky bead. And when you pull tight, your knot will slide into this bead. So now we can leave this to dry, and in the meantime we can start on the other side. And this is why you needed to leave some sealant thread at the end, because we're going to do the same on this side. So you're going to thread the sealant through your needle. So you go back through the two middle blue beads. Then you go underneath the sealant thread, but leave a little loop. Go back through the loop and pull tight to make a knot. Repeat this one more time. And on this side as well, we're gonna add some glue. And then we're going to push our needle through the next Miyuki bead to hide the knot. Push your needle through and pull tight. And then it will look something like this. And now you can leave this one aside until the glue is fully dried. And then we can cut off the excess thread. And then your bead is finished. Now you can create one more, also in the blue beads and the rose gold beads. And then I'll show you how to create the white one in the middle. Now that you have made 2 beads, we can start with the middle bead. The beginning is actually the same. However, for the middle bead, we were using the white Miyuki beads instead of the blue ones. And that's actually the only difference. The technique is the same and the number of rows you need is also the same. And again, for the last 2 rows, we will use the rose gold beads. So once you're finished with this nest, I'll show you how to start decorating. So when you're finally finished, it will look something like this. And then we can finally start the fun part. We can start decorating. For the decoration, we use the white beads. So I put the 2 blue ones aside for a while. We're going to use the 4mm and the 6mm pearl beads, the faceted beads, and the Miyuki seed beads in white. Good to know is that we're adding the flowers later, so we don't need them right now. Then I cut about 20 centimeters of the Ceylon thread and I put it through the needle. Then it's time to find a good spot to attach your first pearl bead to. For the decoration, we will mainly use the 2 middle rows. And for the 6mm pearl, it's important to find 2 seed beads that are on the same line as each other, as you can see here. Push your needle through, but keep a little bit of Ceylon thread at the end so we can make a knot later. Then we add 7 white Miyuki seed beads and a 6mm pearl bead. And we go back through the same beads as where we started with. So you're actually making a little circle. Pull this tight. And then it looks something like this. Then we go from the bottom back through all 7 seed beads. And when you pull tight, you will see that the seed beads are folding nicely around your pearl bead. Now we're going to add another 7 seed beads. And as we did before, we go back through the same beads as where we started with. When you pull tight, you will see your circle is now complete. Now I turn the work around. So as you can see, this is where our Ceylon came out of the bead. And now I'm going to push my needle through the pearl bead from the bottom to the top. Then I turn our work back to the front again. We started with these 7 beads and you can still see it because you can see the Ceylon thread. We skip 1 bead, so that is the first bead of the second group of 7. and we go back through the remaining 6 Miyuki beads. We do this to make sure that there will not be a split in between the 2 groups of 7 beads. Then you tighten up your work before we can start making a knot. And then it will look something like this. So now we make a double knot. And for extra strength, I use a little bit of glue again. And this will be the easiest to do from the back, so you won't have to hide your knot later. And then we have our first decoration almost done. We let the glue dry before cutting off the ends, and then it will be finished. So now we have attached the first pearl, as you can see here, and in the example as well. Now we can continue with the rest of the decorations. And as I mentioned before, we have slightly modified the example as we're showing here in the video. So this is the 10mm gemstone instead of a 12mm gemstone bead. This also means that we have a little less room for all the embellishments. So I chose to only use 2 4mm pearls on both sides and keep the top piece as well. Now let's find the center of where we want to add our 4mm pearl bead. And I think I'm going to leave this one for the spacer and use this one for the faceted bead. So then this will be the next one. It can be a little tricky to put your needle through this bead because this is where we hide the knot from the nest. Push your needle through gently and again keep a little bit of the sealant thread so we can tie a knot at the end later. Now we thread 4 seed beads and then 1 4mm pearl bead. With this we go back through the first bead where we started with. So actually it's the same as we did with the 6mm pearl bead, but this time we will use less Miyuki beads because the pearl bead is smaller. Push your needle through and as you can see you made a half a circle again. Then we go back with the needle through those 4 seed beads. And then it looks like this. Now we add 5 seed beads, and with these we also go back through the first bead where we started with. Push your needle through, and we use 5 Miyuki seed beads this time, so we can do the same as what we did with the 6mm pearl bead. This middle one will prevent a split from happening. Now turn your work around again and we go back up through the bottom of the pearl bead. Pull this tight and turn your work back to the front. Skip 1 seed bead and go back through the 4 last seed beads. Pull tight and make a double knot. For this part as well, I use a little bit of glue on the back. I wipe off any excess glue. And let this dry as well before cutting off the ends. And when you're done, it will look something like this. Now you can attach the second 4mm bead on the other side and make sure you use the same spacing. So I'm going to use this one for the next 4mm bead. And then you can also start attaching the 6mm bead on top. This is just the same technique as we did with the 4 and the 6mm pearl. And then after that I'll show you how we're gonna attach the rest of the top part. Now we can attach the facetted beads. We will start with the facetted beads on the top because we're going to make a little bridge of seed beads over them. And on the facetted beads at the bottom we will later attach the flower beads to. Start by finding the middle bead. This is the one we reserved for the facetted beads. So that's this one. This is where we will go through. Then thread the facetted bead. And go back through the bead that is attached to the nest. Push your needle through and you'll see that the bead fits right in the middle like this. Then go back through the facetted bead so you end up at the beginning again. Now you can make a double knot. I also put a little bit of glue on this knot. Do this again on the back. And while I let this dry, I attach the facetted bead on the other side. And then I'll show you how to make the little bridge. Now we're going to start making the bridge. I turn my work around and I start on this side. I put my needle through the first 3 seed beads. And I pull the sealon thread tight. Leave a little bit of sealon so we can make a knot at the end again. Then I thread 7 seed beads on this side and I put my needle back through those 4 seed beads. And when you pull this tight, it creates a curve. Then I go through all these different seed beads to get to the other side. I pull tight again and I go through the 3 seed beads. Now I thread 6 seed beads, and I do this because my work on this side is slightly different in spacing, but if your work is even, I suggest you use the same number of seed beads on both sides. Then I put my needle through the last 4 beads again. This can also be a little tricky because this is where the knot is hidden. Just push gently and you'll be fine. Then you can turn your work around to see how it looks. And last I'll find a way back to the beginning with my needle. And when you get there, you can take your needle off and you can make a double knot. Again, make sure to do this on the back so you can use a little bit of glue. Let this dry for a while too, before you cut off the ends. And then your charm will look something like this. Now it's time to add the flower beads and the last 2 facetted beads. For this I use 3 flower beads. I hope you can see them good enough because they are like white or transparent. Start by cutting a piece of sealon thread of about 20 centimeters and thread it through your needle. Then we are going to find the middle. And in my case it's the row behind the rose gold beads. So this one. Here I put my needle through and then I thread a faceted bead. Again, leave a piece of sealant thread to make a knot at the end. Then I thread a flower bead and make sure the opening is facing downwards. Then we thread a rose gold bead, a faceted bead, then another rose gold bead, and for this one we also use the blue seed beads, so thread this one as well. And another rose gold bead. So after the flower it looks like this. Now go back through the faceted bead with your needle. Also go back through the rose gold bead and the flower bead, and finally go back through the faceted bead. Then when you pull tight it looks like this. So you have made a triangle with the blue bead at the top. To make the faceted bead extra secure, I go back through the bead that is attached to the nest. I do this in the opposite direction. Then I pull both ends of the sealant thread really tight. Then I turn my work around so we are facing the back. And now I put my needle through a bead that is behind the faceted bead, as you can see here. As you can see, this is the bead that we attached the faceted bead to, and so I go through this bead that is behind it. Then I take my needle off again and I turn my work around and I make a double knot. And I'm also going to use a little bit of glue, and then it looks like this. In the meantime you can continue with the flower on the other side. It is exactly the same, and then I'll show you how to attach the flower in the middle. When everything is dry and you have cut off the ends, then it looks like this. And then we can start with the flower in the middle. The middle flower is actually the same. Again, you look for the center, and this is the bead that we didn't attach to the pearl bead. The only thing that's different is that we start with the flower bead first. After this you thread exactly the same beads as before. So first a rose gold bead, a faceted bead, a rose gold bead, a blue seed bead, and another rose gold bead. Now we go back through the faceted bead again. Also go back through the rose gold bead and the flower bead. When you pull tight on both ends, it will look something like this. To make it extra tight, we go through the same bead again from the opposite direction. Pull tight. Because we only used one bead, we only need to turn the work around and make a double knot. Pull this tight, and of course we're going to use some glue again. Let this dry again, and then I'll show you what else we need to do. When you have cut off the ends, the centerpiece will look like this. Now the hardest part of the necklace is done, I promise. We just need to attach these two beads to the centerpiece, and then we can move on to the other stringing techniques. We attach the beads to the circle that is around the 4mm pearls. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that we are attaching it to the same spot as where the circle is. So in this case, it's the second to last row. So we use that row as well for the blue beads. This ensures that the necklace will be at the same height. Then I'll start with this side. You take another piece of Ceylon thread of about 10 centimeters and you go through the two middle beads of the circle. So we're going to take this one, the fourth bead seen from the right, and the middle bead. We use 2 beads for this because we want it to be very sturdy, and the third bead is too close to the bridge, so we cannot use it. You pull the Ceylon through again, leaving another piece for the knot. Then we pick a good spot, and you have to pay attention to the fact that in this case we're sticking the needle through the blue beads from the top. Then we look for our second to last row, and you look for 2 beads that are close together in the same row. You push your needle through and then I flip both backs to each other so I can see it better. I put my needle through the 2 beads that we've been through before. Then I put my work down for a moment and I pull to see exactly where the bead is going to be. At the last flower we turned the whole thing over so we could tie it off in the back. But because this bead is a lot heavier than the flower, we go through the bead again. So I go through the 2 blue beads. And back through the 2 white beads again. So then I made another complete circle. Then I do turn the work around, and to make everything extra secure I go through the blue bead from the row behind. So this is the back side of the necklace and I go through this bead. I take the needle off again and make a double knot. And then of course we're going to use some glue again. Let the glue dry before you cut off the ends, and in the meantime you can attach the second bead. And now we can start on the last part of the necklace, and that is these rows of beads. Because I used the 10mm gemstone, I chose to do only 4 rows instead of 6 rows. You will need quite a bit of Ceylon thread, I think about 1 meter. We're also going to attach these rows to the second to last row for the blue beads. I want the necklace to start a little bit to the top, so I chose these 2. And then I'm going to start with the first bead. I thread the Ceylon through and I make sure that the threads are the same length. So that's why I cut a longer piece of Ceylon thread, because one piece is going to be for 2 strands. So we start by threading a pearl bead. And we're also going to put the second strand through the same pearl bead. You can do this by pushing your bead upwards so there's more space to put your thread through. And then it will look something like this. So as you can see, both strands are through the same pearl bead. Now I'm gonna put one strand aside because I would like to work on one at a time. And for this strand we're gonna use the 4mm pearl beads, the 2mm white Miyuki seed beads and the rose gold Miyuki seed beads. Then I thread 3 Miyuki seed beads, 1 rose gold and 3 more white ones. This is also the pattern you're going to repeat, because after these 7 beads you thread another pearl bead. You repeat this pattern 11 times and you end with a pearl bead. When you have repeated this 11 times, I will explain how we're going to do the second row. As you can see, I finished the first row, and if you want you can just tape this to the table, because we can't tie the whole thing until all the rows are finished. Now we start with the second row, and this is almost the same, only this time we do not thread the pearl bead, but instead we go through the same pearl bead from the first row. So we start again with 3 white seed beads, 1 rose gold bead, and again 3 more seed beads. And then we go with the needle through the pearl bead from the first row. Like so. Pull tight, and then you'll see that the rows will be side by side and they go through the same pearl bead. Now you repeat this pattern again until you get to the end, and each time you go through the same pearl bead from the first row. And then I'll show you how we're gonna do the third row. Unfortunately, the recording of the third and fourth rows didn't go quite right, which is why I'm showing it from the other side. But basically this is exactly the same. As you can see, we're using the blue bead that we picked out earlier, so the one above the first and the second row. And the best way to do this is to pass your needle through the bead from the top to the bottom, so your needle is already attached to the third row. Then again, make sure that the ends are the same length. And we thread a pearl bead over both ends. Next, thread 3 seed beads. And for this row we skip the rose gold bead and we use the bead from the second row. So thread your needle through the rose gold bead from the second row. And then you thread 3 more white seed beads. Also add a 4mm pearl bead. And then your first piece is done again. Repeat this pattern until you get to the end, and then I'll show you how to start with our last row. As you can see, I finished the third row, and now we can start with the fourth row. This row is actually the easiest because we already used this technique with the second row. You thread 3 white Miyuki seed beads, a rose gold bead, and again 3 white seed beads. And now we go through the pearl bead from the third row. So as you can see, this is exactly the same technique as we used in the second row. Now finish this row as well until you get to the end, and then I'll show you how we're gonna attach the toggle clasp. As you can see, I also finished the fourth row, and now you can just take the needle off. And it's time for the toggle clasp to shine. But first I'm going to take the tape off and hold everything together. And then we're going to thread our final pearl bead. This is the easiest to do per 2 threads, like so. And then I pull the threads tight and push the bead upwards, so that there's more space for our third thread. Pull this one tight as well, and then thread your last thread through. As you can see, we have made a nice triangle, and then it's time to make a knot. Twist it around my fingers, then I go underneath and I pull the thread through my fingers. Pull this tight, and then I'll make sure the threads are the same length. And after this, I put all the threads through the eye of the toggle clasp. I turn the thread around my fingers and the toggle clasp. And I pull it upwards through my fingers again. Pull tight and make sure that you make the knot as close to the pearl bead as possible. And for extra strength, I put another knot around the toggle clasp, and again I put it underneath the thread and pull it upwards again. And of course we're going to use some glue here again. And this time I'm going to use some more glue to make it extra secure. Let this dry completely, and in the meantime you can finish the other side. As you can see, I'm finally finished with both sides, and I also cut off both ends. And now your necklace is finished. In our web shop we have more gemstones in different colors and different sizes, so you can also choose to make this necklace in a different color, or as you can see with this purple one you can use more stones. The technique is exactly the same, also with the pearl beads, so get creative and create your own design. I hope you liked this tutorial and that you're going to create the necklace yourself. If you did, feel free to share your creation on Instagram using our hashtag #BeadsandBasics. All the materials can be bought on our website www.beadsandbasics.com, and if you would like to see more video tutorials, please subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section down below. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!